My name is Dr. Evelyn Hart, and for nearly 2 decades, I've been a physician in Ashwood, Vermont, a small town cradled in a valley where the mountains cast long, somber shadows and the wind carries whispers of pine and damp earth. It's a place where people live quietly, their struggles tucked beneath layers of flannel and stoicism, like secrets kept from the light. I've stitched wounds, set bones, and held hands through countless nights of grief, but none have stayed with me like Sarah Ellis and her fractured family. I was her doctor, her reluctant confidant, and now as I sit in my dimly lit office, with her file spread open on my desk, the pages worn from too many readings, I'm haunted by the weight of what I saw, what I failed to stop, and what I'll never fully understand. Sarah first walked into my clinic 3 years ago, in the crisp autumn of 2021. She was 37 then, with hazel eyes that held a quiet weariness and a smile that flickered like a lantern struggling against a breeze. She'd moved to Ashwood with her husband, Michael Carter, and their 2 adopted children, Jacob, a lanky 14-year-old with a guarded stare, and Grace, a gentle 11-year-old whose laughter was soft as a spring rain. They'd come from Georgia, fleeing a past they rarely mentioned, a tangle of hardship Sarah hinted at once when she said, "We needed somewhere the noise couldn't follow." Michael was a welder, a man of few words but steady hands, his broad frame filling doorways like he could hold up the world if he had to. Sarah stayed home, pouring her energy into their modest clapboard house on the outskirts, a place with peeling paint and a stubborn garden she fought to tame. She'd bring Jacob and Grace in for their annual checkups, a thermos of chamomile tea in hand, chatting about Jacob's science fair projects or Grace's latest drawings of butterflies. I liked her immediately. Her warmth was genuine, a rare thing in a town where people often kept to themselves. But even then, I saw the faint cracks. It was in the way her hands trembled as she handed me Grace's vaccination card, or how she'd pause mid-sentence, her gaze drifting to the window where the gray sky pressed against the glass. She started coming in alone after that first year, complaining of headaches that throbbed behind her eyes, sleepless nights that left her hollow, and an ache she described as a weight I can't shake. I ran blood tests, checked her vitals, suggested it might be stress from raising 2 kids in a new place. She'd nod, thank me with that fragile smile, and leave, her footsteps echoing down the hall. I should have dug deeper. I should have asked about the shadows I saw in her eyes, the ones she hid behind small talk and tired shrugs. But I didn't. I trusted her to tell me if it was more. By the fall of 2023, Sarah's visits became a rhythm I couldn't ignore. She'd appear in my exam room, her coat still buttoned, clutching her purse like it was all that kept her grounded. One October afternoon, she broke open. "I can't sleep, Evelyn," she whispered, her voice so faint I had to lean across the desk to catch it. "I wake up every night, and I'm so afraid, but I don't know why." That's when she told me about the pills. Lorazepam to calm her nerves, then oxycodone when the calm wasn't enough. She'd gotten them from Tara, a wiry woman who worked odd jobs around town, her laugh sharp and grating, her presence always a little too loud. Sarah said it started after a fight with Michael, a petty squabble over unwashed dishes that erupted into shouted accusations and slammed doors. The pills, she said, took the edges off, made me feel like I wasn't sinking. I urged her to stop, offered to get her into a program an hour away in Burlington, warned her about the risks piling up like storm clouds. She shook her head, eyes glistening. "Michael can't know. He's been through too much already." I pressed gently, told her addiction didn't care about secrets, but she stood, thanked me, and left. I should have followed up, called her the next day, insisted. Instead, I let her slip away, trusting she'd come back if it got worse. That was my first failure. The months that followed were a slow unraveling. Sarah's appointments grew sporadic. She'd cancel with flimsy excuses, then show up unannounced, her hair tangled, her eyes glassy and distant. I'd ask about the pills, and she'd deflect, claiming she'd cut back, swearing she was fine. I started to suspect Tara was more than a friend, that she was the current pulling Sarah under, but I had no evidence, just a doctor's intuition honed by years of watching people break. I'd see Tara around town sometimes, leaning against a gas station wall or smoking outside the diner, and I'd wonder what hold she had over Sarah. Then, in March 2024, Michael called me late one night. His voice was raw, frayed at the edges like he'd been shouting into the wind. "She's not herself, Doc. She's accusing me of things, says I don't care, that I'm never there. She wants me to work more, then screams when I'm gone. I don't know what to do." I told him to bring her in, and when they arrived the next day, Sarah sat silent, arms crossed, while Michael poured out his confusion. He said she'd stopped cooking, stopped tending the garden, stopped being the mother Jacob and Grace had known. His hands shook as he spoke, and I saw the toll it was taking. A man who'd built a life with her, now watching it crumble. I sent him out and turned to Sarah. "What's happening?" I asked, keeping my tone soft. She stared at the floor, then muttered, "He doesn't get it. I'm drowning, and he's just standing there." She admitted the pills were worse, more frequent, mixed with whatever Tara could scrounge up, a cocktail of escape she couldn't resist. I begged her to let me help, to tell Michael to check into rehab. "He'll leave me," she said, voice cracking. "He'll take the kids." I wrote a referral, pressed it into her hand, and watched her crumple it as she walked out. I should have called Michael right then. Ethics be damned, but I didn't. I let her go again. Spring came, and with it, the inevitable collapse. It was May 17th, 2024, when Sarah landed in my ER. Michael had found her unconscious on their couch, a bottle of oxycodone spilled across the coffee table like scattered marbles. He'd called 911, his voice breaking over the line, and the paramedics had pumped her stomach, stabilized her, but she wouldn't wake. I stood by her bed in the ICU, the beep of the heart monitor a cruel metronome, and felt a guilt that clawed at my chest. Michael was there, his face ashen, hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. He told me the story in fragments, how he'd cut his hours at the welding shop to take over the house, cooking every meal, scrubbing floors, driving the kids to school, how she'd bragged to Tara about training him, her voice smug over the phone, how he'd finally snapped and demanded she step up. He'd found the pills weeks earlier, confronted her, forced her to cut Tara off, and thought she was improving. Then Tara sent him a video. Sarah, high out of her mind, pressed against some stranger in a bar outside town. "I was going to leave her," he said, tears streaking his face. "I told her we were done, moved her stuff to the garage. That's when she did this." She stayed in that coma for 9 days. I checked on her every shift, adjusting IVs, reading charts, whispering prayers I hadn't said since med school. When she woke, I was there, holding her chart like a shield. She looked at me, tears spilling over, and whispered, "I didn't mean to." We talked for hours about the pills, the shame, the terror of losing Michael and the kids. She agreed to rehab, and I arranged it, a 30-day program in Burlington, hopeful she'd find her footing. Michael stayed too, softer than I'd expected, holding her hand as she left for the center. I thought we'd turned a corner, that maybe she'd climb out of the dark. I was wrong. She came back in August, thinner, quieter, but with a spark I hadn't seen in months. Michael brought her to my office for a follow-up, and they sat close, his arm around her shoulders. She thanked me, said rehab had given her clarity, promised she'd stay clean. I believed her, or wanted to. I prescribed therapy, checked her vitals, sent them home with a cautious optimism. But 3 months later, November 12, 2024, she was back in my ER. Another overdose, this time at Tara's trailer on the edge of town. Michael was at work, welding steel beams under a cold sky, when it happened. Tara's boyfriend called it in, his voice panicked, saying she'd been fine 1 minute, gone the next. They couldn't save her. She died before the ambulance reached us, her heart too weary to fight. I signed the death certificate, my hands trembling, and watched Michael collapse in the waiting room, a man shattered beyond repair. Jacob and Grace were at a summer camp 2 towns over, a gift from Michael's parents, unaware their world had just imploded. I saw them a week later, when Michael brought them to my office. Jacob, now 15, wouldn't look at me, his jaw clenched, his anger a wall I couldn't breach. Grace clung to Michael's arm, her voice barely audible as she asked, "Why didn't Mommy get better?" I fumbled for words, settling on, "She tried so hard, sweetheart," knowing it wasn't enough. Michael looked at me, his eyes hollow, and said, "I did everything I could, Doc. Everything." I nodded, but inside I was screaming. I hadn't. I'd failed them all, missed every sign, let every chance slip through my fingers. Since then, I've watched their lives unravel from a distance. Michael quit welding, took a desk job at the hardware store, his hands too unsteady for the torch. Jacob's anger festered. He started skipping school, picking fights, a boy raging against a loss he couldn't process. Grace withdrew, her drawings piling up in my waiting room, all of Sarah with flowers in her hair, a mother frozen in crayon and memory. I got them into therapy, prescribed antidepressants for Michael, but it felt like pouring water into a cracked cup. I heard he started smoking again, a habit Sarah had begged him to quit years ago because the smell clung to her clothes. Their house sits silent now. No garden blooming, no laughter spilling from the windows, just a shell where a family once lived. Tonight, I'm alone in my office, the clock ticking past midnight. Sarah's file lies open, a testament to every missed opportunity, every warning I ignored. I think about her smile, how it faded over those 3 years, how I let it slip away. I think about Michael, carrying a guilt that mirrors mine, and those kids, left to navigate a world dimmer without her. I could have done more. Called her back that October day she crumpled the referral, told Michael the truth when he begged for answers, tracked down Tara and demanded she leave Sarah alone, but I didn't. I trusted the system, trusted her promises, trusted time to mend what I couldn't. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and I'll drive past their house on my way to my sister's. I'll see the porch light glowing, maybe glimpse Michael through the window, alone with his ghosts. I'll wonder if he's thinking of Sarah, replaying those last months, searching for the moment he could have saved her. I'll wonder if Jacob's still angry, if Grace still draws her mother's face. And I'll carry this regret, heavy as the mountains outside, knowing I was part of their story. A witness who saw too little, a healer who didn't heal, a voice that stayed silent too long. Sarah's gone, and all that's left are the echoes of what might have been, fading into the Vermont night like a song no one remembers the words to.